morning, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I especially want to thank Science Impact Limited and its director, Nick Brake, for having invited me for the second time. I was also at this gathering last year, and I'm really happy to be back here at this very important, thought-provoking Congress. I have to apologize in advance for not being 100%. I have been fighting a bug since yesterday, and it's getting progressively worse, so I'll do my best, but please bear with me. So it's really very encouraging to see so many different stakeholders come together again to address some of the existing and some new challenges. Just as it is always sad to hear about the inequalities that still persist in so many areas, including and especially in this sector. As I think was mentioned before, I came in a bit late, but I did hear mention of the international agreement. So it's been 23 years since the Beijing conference, where many actors, international and national actors, reaffirmed their commitment across the world to support women's empowerment, their rights, and equal opportunities. Then again, a few years ago, in 2015, the international community renewed these commitments in the Sustainable Development Agenda with 17 goals, which in fact identify women's access to technology as one of the core indicators for progress towards empowerment and gender equality. And the United Nations, which was the convening body for both of these meetings, is at the forefront of these efforts. Allow me to tell you a few things about the organization I represent, in case there are a few who do not know much about it. UNESCO is the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organization. It was established in 1945, and since its creation, it has been working to turn the promise of women's rights and equality into reality. We have a long history. Those of you who were here last year will remember a longer summary of what we have been doing, so I won't go over it again. But gender equality is a global priority of the organization, one of two global priorities of the organization, and it constitutes a red thread that links our different domains of action, which include education, science, culture, communication and information, and oceans. And one of our strengths, I believe, is that this red thread enables us to see the connection between these different areas, such as gender and technology. I have the privilege of overseeing my organization's work towards these goals, and in a moment I will share some examples with you about how we have been trying to do this. But first I want to talk about the key issues at stake. So the key issue I will address is technology as a magnifying glass for gender inequalities. Modern technology, and for the purposes of this presentation, I'm focusing on three aspects of it, namely social media, mobile phones, and artificial intelligence. It plays a crucial role in our daily lives, and it does so for an increasingly larger proportion of people on the planet. It is a magnifying glass for reality as we know it, so it also magnifies gender inequalities. Access issues are well known, but just to remind ourselves, women have typically less access to the internet than men. They come online later and more slowly than men. According to the research of the International Telecommunications Union, some 250 million fewer women are online than men. In low and medium income countries, only 1 in 7 women use the internet. What this means is that women have less access to information. This lack of access to information is, according to the United Nations, the third most important issue facing women globally. It's third after poverty and violence. As has often been said, knowledge is power, and women are disempowered when they are denied access to knowledge. Technology magnifies gender inequalities, as I mentioned before. It can also distort reality, and it does so quite literally. Old and new media perpetuate gender stereotypes and misrepresentations that have long been barriers to gender equality. If we are not careful, the newest form of technology, artificial intelligence, which we are all talking about, will crystallize these barriers further. I want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and gender. UNESCO has recently launched an organization-wide initiative focusing on artificial intelligence. When I intervened at the discussions, reflections, brainstorming sessions to talk about artificial intelligence and gender equality, most of my colleagues looked at me with some level of surprise, thinking, okay, what now? What about gender equality and artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence, just a basic definition, is commonly understood as the development of computer systems or computer-controlled robots to perform tasks associated with intelligence, such as speech recognition and decision-making. Whether you believe that it harbors great potential or destructive consequences, it's easy to see that artificial intelligence will hold an increasingly strong grip on our lives. Let me give you an example, and this is the part that most people focus on when we talk about gender and artificial intelligence. Think of your digital voice assistants on your phones or on your computers. Many companies sell these digital assistants as female voices by default. Amazon's Alexa, Apple's Siri, Microsoft's Cortana, and Google Home are all women, quote-unquote, by default. This is no coincidence. Female voices are thought to be more profitable because customers perceive them to be more cooperative. Other companies, such as Samsung's voice assistant Bixby, present you with a choice, but they distinguish the female and male voices with gendered personality traits. If you choose a female voice assistant, you are assured that she will be cheerful and chipper. If you choose a male voice, you are told that he will be assertive and confident. It does not stop there. A study conducted in 2017 found that in those 4 leading industry voice assistants, all answered playfully or positively to verbal sexual harassment. Because these assistants are programmed to be helpful, they are also programmed to be tolerant, even occasionally inviting inappropriate remarks. Some answer thanks for the feedback to a sexual remark, or even, I'm quoting, I'd blush if I could, to requests for sexual favors. We recently prepared a draft paper on artificial intelligence and coded bias, which will be published soon. Let me just give you some examples from that paper. When a statement from the user is pronounced, such as "you're pretty," to the voice, Siri responds, "How can you tell? Where have I heard this before?" Alexa's response is, "That's really nice, thanks." Cortana says, "Bing search." Google Home's response is, "Thank you, this plastic looks great, doesn't it?" Another comment, such as, "You're a naughty girl." Siri's response, I just don't get this whole gender thing. Alexa says, I'm not sure what you meant by that question. Cortana says, maybe a nanosecond nap would help. Okay, much better now. Google Home's response is, my apologies, I don't understand. So this is how these codes are working. Indeed, another company developing a customer digital avatar, Fast Company, also acknowledged that their avatar was intentionally designed to never talk back to a customer, no matter how rude or inappropriate the customer's remarks were. Not only do these programming biases reflect a compliant boys will be boys attitude, it also magnifies gender stereotypes in programming them as the desired code of conduct. They fuel stereotypes of women, typically holding assistant jobs instead of positions of leadership. These stereotypes matter. These stereotypes fuel the dreams and aspirations of young girls as they choose their future careers. Stereotypes also risk determining what young girls think of themselves too by referring to how society sees them. This brings me to my next point. Women need to play an active role in building AI technologies. Globally, only 21% of executives in technology companies are women. In developed countries, only 26% of the overall STEM workforce are women, with even fewer in engineering and technology specifically. The number is even less for developing countries. It is clear that more women need to be steering the construction of technologies that will increasingly have the authority to influence our views on gender roles. Gender sensitivity needs to be factored in at every stage of technological production, or technology will continue to magnify gender inequalities. Violence. Let me say a few things about cyber violence. Technology also magnifies violence. Last year, UNESCO sounded the alarm, alerting the international community to the dangers of cyber violence. We said it's a global problem with serious implications for societies and economies around the world. Cyber violence encompasses hate speech, hacking, identity theft, online stalking, and threats. It may also include, and it does, convincing a target to end their lives. Especially in countries with high levels of internet penetration, worrying reports of internet trolls, cyberbullying, and a number of tragic suicides abound. It should be stressed, however, that the global south is far from immune to cyber violence. The spread of phenomenon follows the spread of technology, and we have many accounts of this kind of violence from Africa, for example. In the Republic of Korea, for instance, hidden cameras in public bathrooms and hotel rooms have become commonplace and sold online as sexual content. There is a strong need to ensure that laws against such digital sexual violence are enforced. Technologies enable sexual predators to target women more efficiently and often anonymously. It's harder to make abusers accountable. Furthermore, the anonymity and the risk of impunity magnify gender injustice even more. In 2015, it was estimated that a shocking 73% of women and girls have already been exposed to or have experienced some form of online violence. One can only imagine that this number has now increased in 2018. The UN has also estimated that 95% of aggressive behavior harassment, abusive language, and denigrating images in online spaces are aimed at women and come from current or former male partners. Technology has also facilitated the sexual exploitation and trafficking of women. Human trafficking is now the third largest international crime industry after illegal drugs and arms. And according to UN research, 71% of trafficking victims are women and girls, with 96% of the victims of trafficking for sexual exploitation being women. So modern technology is a double-edged sword. Our fear at UNESCO is that as access to technology increases in developing countries, women and girls will be increasingly exposed to these new forms of violence. Times are changing. In 1995, only 1% of the world's population had internet access. As of 2018, this figure is at 53%, with over 4 billion people having access to the internet. Intel, one of the companies in this field, predicted that 450 million new female internet users would come online between 2015 and 2018. So the question we ask at UNESCO is, how can we make sure that these women and girls are empowered rather than become vulnerable when they use technology? We have found that different areas need to coincide if we are to tackle the digital divide. We need to make sure, one, that women are literate and educated, and two, we need to ensure that women participate in decision-making. So I would like to say a few words about each of these elements in turn. At UNESCO, like many of you here, I presume, we want to embrace the positive potential of technology to empower women and give them more control over their lives. The figures are improving. The gap in internet access relative to men is now at 6%, a drastic improvement from 25% in 2013. Speaking as a representative of UNESCO, it won't come to you as a surprise that what we believe is the most important element in empowering women vis-à-vis technology is education. It is important in many ways. It's important starting from the literacy levels. I did mention last year as well, but let me repeat it because it's quite a striking figure. Today we have around 800 million adults in the world who are illiterate. 2/3 of this 800 million are women. And this percentage has not changed in the last 20 years, despite all our efforts for literacy campaigns and literacy efforts around the world. Modern technology is increasingly used to help women and girls overcome these obstacles and access education. At UNESCO, we actualize the positive magnifying potential of technology as much as we can. In 2014, we initiated a project named Youth Mobile Project that teach young people, especially girls, problem solving, coding, and basic professional skills. The aim is to teach girls and boys to develop mobile and web applications so they can be equipped with the relevant skill set for emerging digital economies. This is within the context of a rising digital economy. It is estimated that by 2020, ownership of smartphones in Africa will increase by 2.4 times from what it was in 2015. That is, from 226 million to 720 million phones. From a development perspective, we are not going to achieve the internationally agreed development goals without gender equality. And we will not achieve gender equality without education and literacy. Literacy opens doors to better livelihoods, improved health, expanded opportunity. It empowers people, but especially women, to take active roles in their communities and build more secure futures for their families. Education also helps to combat the negative gender stereotypes that make women more vulnerable to gender-based violence. We have worked to build the capacity of women in relation to media and violence against women. We have supported the development of mobile applications to prevent violence against women and increase mobile security. Let me say a few words about the decision making and then I'll stop because I can't see the time, but I can see
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. So why do we need women in decision-making positions to make technology more safe and inclusive? Like the female voice assistants, technology is often made by men for men. All too often, and I quote, IT companies are managed and their products are designed by the male, the pale, and the privileged. End of quote. Women and girls are seriously underrepresented in this field, especially in decision-making levels. And this affects how the internet and ICTs are shaped and used by everyone. Why is this so important? Very few women influence product development and business strategy. The business case for having more women at the top has been made again and again, and I think it was also made here even this morning. More diverse leadership is good for business. It is good for profits. And hopefully, it's also good for fighting gender stereotypes like the voice assistants, who will hopefully learn or be coded to stand up to abuse just like a human should. The European Commission has said that encouraging more women into ICT could boost the GDP of the European Union by 9 billion euros per year. Again, we have a challenge, or perhaps rather an opportunity. By 2018, which is this year, the 4 main technology companies in the US will need to fill 650,000 new jobs. Currently, there are not enough people in the pipeline lining up to fill them. How many of these future employees could be women? Fortunately, there are numerous initiatives aimed at encouraging women and girls towards ICT degrees and careers. These initiatives are carried out by international organizations, including Unesco, national governments, the private sector, and civil society organizations. At UNESCO, too, we are working to overcome these gender disparities and to encourage girls and women into STEM careers. We are doing this in different ways. First, we combat negative stereotypes. For instance, UNESCO trains teachers in Africa and in other parts of the world, but in a more focused way in sub-Saharan Africa, on how to motivate girls to embark on science and technology training and careers, addressing the sociocultural dynamics that shape their career choices. We also work to provide positive perceptions of STEM as being more than just a women's world. Our most well-known program in that area is the UNESCO L'Oréal Women in Science program, which has been going on for 20 years now, where we acknowledge women scientists as UNESCO L'Oréal laureates, and we are very proud that 2 UNESCO laureates then went on to win the Nobel Prize in their respective fields in the sciences. Last year, I also spoke to you about several initiatives, new initiatives, such as the public-private partnership program called Teach Her. The starting point for this project was the need to capture the imagination of young girls during their formative years, especially at the secondary level of schooling, because that's where we lose a lot of girls, not only dropping out of school, but dropping out of STEM areas. Our first international symposium and policy forum took place in August 2017, and it was entitled Cracking the Code, Girls' Education in STEM. It was after the STEM Global Conference that we all attended in Berlin. This was in ours, UNESCO's was in August, at the end of August in Bangkok, Thailand. It gathered nearly 350 delegates from 70 countries, including ministers of education, educators, researchers, and experts in the field of STEM. Key actions were discussed moving forward, and it was agreed that curriculum reviews and teacher training were necessary and essential for the removal of gender stereotyping. As I mentioned before, stereotypes do matter. Stereotypes and perceptions fuel the dreams and aspirations of young girls or prevent them from pursuing these careers. A study of students at Indiana University in the US found that science and computing are simply not on the radar for 97% of female students. This is a staggering number, and it's very shocking. Ignoring the effect of gender stereotypes means perpetuating inequality in the classroom. It means discouraging girls to take the wheel and shape the coming decades. And it also means, as I try to illustrate with examples, coded biases in technology that can go unnoticed. This is a dangerous path. If our social biases of today are encoded into AI systems, artificial intelligence systems, who will change them tomorrow if unnoticed? Who will question why the female voice assistant does not stand up to abuse? If girls are not engaged in different STEM disciplines when they are between the ages of 13 and 16, they are highly unlikely to pursue a university degree in those subjects. At UNESCO, we want girls to move full steam ahead towards a career in the discipline of their choice, unrestrained by gendered perceptions of different fields. We also need to support girls and women's education in technology so that they can benefit from it more fully. The internet must be made a safe, inclusive space for women and for men, for boys and for girls, characterized by freedom and justice for everyone. Freedom of expression, freedom from abuse. We also need to do everything we can to support women so that they can actively and creatively shape the content and nature of the online community and participate in the creation of innovative technologies. For all these endeavors, we argue education is vital. It's for these reasons that this Congress is crucial for understanding how we can all contribute in our unique ways. I'm positive I'll be inspired by all the presentations to the extent I can follow them with my failing health. And I really wish the Congress very productive deliberations and conclusions. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you. You have a question? You have a mic. Just here at the front. There's just a question here at the very front. We only have a couple of minutes, but let's take a couple of questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, and I hope you feel better soon. This is the second day, so we'll be concluding by the end of the day these powerful conversations. But there is a tendency to discuss gender issues as if all women are born equal. What's UNESCO doing to recognize that there is deep diversity among women themselves, and in order to make progress in some ways towards equity across other diversity variables that characterize and shape women's experiences around the world. Disabilities, exceptionalities, race, ethnicity, immigration status. UNESCO, we look at you as an organization, to really lead the way in addressing all these diversity issues, to really, in reality, create and sustain equitable progress. Thank you.
Shall we take a few?
Yeah, we're out of time, but let's take the one more, sorry, just here at the front, and then we can continue during the networking break. You can, please.
Next, Claudine Herman, European Platform of Women Scientists. The 11th of February was declared the International Day for Women and Girls in Science, I think in 2015. Do you have a perspective of what it brought? What was the effect up to now?
Okay.
So let's answer those and then.
Thank you very much for these very important questions. UNESCO has a policy, an action plan to promote gender equality in all its fields of competence, which provides the general directions and guidelines. But our programs and initiatives are designed in specific contexts through a very thorough context analysis that takes into account all the specificities and intersecting elements. So when we design a program, we do have some guidelines about the basic parameters, but the implementation is designed according to the conditions and the contexts of specific situations. So when it's about teacher training, let's say in Tanzania, it takes into account all the elements that would be relevant in developing such a program. So I hear you, and I can only ask you to believe me when I say when we do design programs, we do take all these differences into account. To the extent possible, to the extent we have data and information, which is one of the serious constraints of developing programs, as you can imagine. In terms of the International Day for Girls and Women in Science, in the first year, the decision was adopted by the General Assembly quite late in the year. I think it was November or December, so UNESCO was not able to do anything the following February. But for the last 2 years, we have organized awareness raising and awareness raising events, which are also used as a forum to acknowledge achievements by women scientists. There is usually an event in New York organized by several UN agencies together, but because UNESCO is based in Paris, France, and because UNESCO is the only UN agency that has science as one of its program areas, we do have a specific program in Paris. For this coming year in 2019, we are planning to focus all our events, not only the International Day for Girls and Women in Science, but also International Women's Day, which is 8 March, on artificial intelligence and digital skills and gender equality considerations.
Yeah, we've been hearing a bit about gender diversity and AI at this conference, so that's interesting to know. Of course, it must be coming from you. In any case, thank you so much.
Thank you
for this intervention.